Good evening, and welcome. I'm Tony Marks. I'm the president of the New York Public Library. Thank you all for being with us. Tonight, it is my real pleasure to introduce our friend, Lloyd Blankfein. Lloyd was, as you all know, chairman and CEO of Goldman Sachs from 2006 to 2018. He's now the author of a really compelling, excellent new memoir, Streetwise, From Brooklyn to the Boardroom. The book is indeed a candid memoir of global leadership in an age of extreme turbulence, to put it mildly. You're going to hear more from Lloyd, and you'll enjoy that, and then you should grab the book. You could borrow it from the New York Public Library, or you can buy it. I will just say that in addition to what you're going to hear from Lloyd, at 7, he got his first library card at the New Lots Library and took out 3 books a week. So he's been serious for a very long time. The other I want to draw, this quote from the book I think says so much about Lloyd. I'm not surprised when someone without polish or academic credentials turns out to be really smart. I'm surprised that other people are surprised. Lloyd will be in conversation with our great friend, Hortense le Gentil. Hortense is a world-renowned executive leadership coach, speaker, and author, including of The Unlocked Leader, magnificent book about how to bring one's humanity to leadership, truly inspiring. She guides CEOs and senior executives on their journey and has been recognized as one of Inc.'s top 50 leadership and management experts. She is a coach extraordinaire, including my coach. She is an inspiration to so many with her warmth and her wisdom, a rare combination. At the end of the conversation, Lloyd and Hortense will be glad to take some of your questions. You can write them down on the note cards as your spot with those cute little pencils that we distribute. Some of my colleagues will come around periodically during the talk to collect them. Before the audience questions, we have 2 very special guests who are going to join us to ask Lloyd a couple questions. Halima Jame and Ashleen Leah, who are 2 members of the library's Teen Center Ambassadors program. This program offers internships to teens to help develop job readiness and leadership skills with a focus on library resources and peer-to-peer engagement. They create fun and exciting events and resources for teens, and they help their peer teens learn about the library and become part of the library community. They are also, as you'll see with Ashleen and Halma, completely brilliant. If you or someone you know wants to learn more about the program and apply, go to the Teen Center Ambassador Program at the library's website, nypl.org. Live from NYPL is made possible by the continuing generosity of Celeste Bartos, Manaz Ispahani Bartos, and Adam Bartos, and of course, by all of you. Thank you for your support, and thank you again for being here. Now, please join me in welcoming Lloyd Blankfein and Hortense le Gentil.
Well, nice to see you this way.
Yeah, nice to see you too. So, thank you for being here with us tonight.
No, I feel like an author. I'm in the library, for crying out loud.
At least,
at least, yes, at last.
At last. Sorry. Yes, exactly. So, thank you, Tony, for this wonderful introduction. You're way too kind with me, and thank you for being here, Lloyd. And okay, I have to keep my microphone there. I'm going to try to follow the rules. So, last time we talked, Lloyd, it was difficult to stop the conversation. So today we have 35 minutes. So
let's go. And I talk.
Let's go. Okay,
yeah,
we start. So you had an impressive journey, and from public housing in Brooklyn to the Boardroom. But tonight I want to focus on you, the human being you are, and the leader you are. So what drives you? What is your purpose? So, shall we?
You know, gosh, you're an executive coach. I'm going to get a lot out of these questions. What drives me? I think at different points, it was when I was starting out, I'll tell you what drove me. What drove me is I wanted to get out of the projects in Brooklyn, and I was very focused on it. And, you know, that sounds, when I hear myself say that, it sounds terrible because there are people still in the projects in Brooklyn, and, you know, I'd like them to be happy there too, but I was unhappy. You know, we lived in a small place. We were 3 generations living there. My grandmother, my parents, my sister, her baby lived there. And I was very young, going to, again, in the projects, going to Thomas Jefferson High School in East New York, Brooklyn, which was a failed high school on triple session, and blah, blah, blah. And so I was very focused on just getting out. And I tell you, I did not have a long-term vision of becoming... I wouldn't have known what Wall Street was. Yeah. I wouldn't have known what any of it was. I just wanted to go. My goal was to go to go to college out of town, whatever that was. And then, of course, when I went from one lily pad to the next one, then my horizons opened up, and I got more ambitious as things went on.
Yeah, I understand that, and thank you for sharing. And but back today. Okay, we will go back to the purpose, but. Back today, so we are here at the New York Public Library, and to your words, there is only one New York Public Library. So I think Tony, share a little with us. But I mean, what does a library mean to you?
Well, I tell you, when you talk about a library, one of the things is I could ask that. I would like to know the library. Everybody's library now is sitting on their iPhone or in their desktop. But I mean, if you're talking about the concept of a library, I mean, obviously, it's information, and now information today is organized, and so information is available and organized. When I look at, I don't know. I think the really interesting question is, what is the library going to be? Because when I think of a library, I think of people, scholars coming in here, getting help and finding books. Yeah. And now the library is not just a destination. The library is a cloud.
It's a cloud, exactly. But take us back when you were in Brooklyn. You were a kid, and you came every week, to pick up a book. So take us back there. So where did you come? Look, what did you do?
I was a striver. I was saying Tony said, you could buy a book or you could borrow it. And I'm saying, gee, people borrow books still because everything is so available and online. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if that. I don't know. I don't know if that if it still persists that way. But for me, anything that exposed, I like to go to the library and I like to read about things. I like turning on TV and watching TV shows where people lived in houses and had lawns, and I like watching Let's Make a Deal on TV where somebody would win a boat, motor, and trailer for guessing the right door, and I'm thinking, where would you put a boat, motor, and trailer? I lived in the projects, so I thank goodness I didn't win one. But everything for me was a matter of getting exposure to to a different world, and so eventually I kept climbing into those different worlds.
Yeah. And did you find any role model in the books or people that you met in the library back then, or not, maybe?
Oh, not specific. Well, I had along the way. Look, as I was growing up, I got a job one year. Some teacher in school was a waterfront counselor, and so he gave me a job as a junior waterfront counselor at some camp, and that was a lot of exposure for me because I met kids whose parents went to college and whose parents went to work in suits, and they had they went to their summer camp. This was camp in upstate New York, and they brought their own canoe paddles and had their transistor radios, and so that was an exposure that I hadn't had before, and everything opened up the world. I'll tell you one thing it did. It made me sensitive, and when you see kids, it made me sensitive to be thinking about how other people must regard me at this point and what they must be thinking. So it's a useful experience to have gone through.
That's a human experience.
Yes.
Yeah, so community experience. So now imagine that, so we are still at that time, Brooklyn. So now imagine you, Lloyd of today, you just run into your young Lloyd. Can you imagine that a minute? So you today, meeting your young self, then what would you tell him?
Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm strange, but I don't really feel dissociated. I mean, I carry with me. I'll tell you.
It's not dissociated.
Different insecurities.
It's just an exercise.
different insecurities, but they rhyme. I always found myself in situations that I felt ill-prepared for, that I felt a little bit odd to be in. That people, like I always, dressed like I was from Brooklyn when I was meeting people who, went to private schools when I went to college, and after, and I always felt a little bit. And guess what? When I was working my way up the letterhead of a big firm, first I went to a law firm, then I worked at a big investment bank, obviously, and even working up my way up the letterhead of that, I always felt myself. I always walked into a room, and I think I said, once in the book, I said, sometimes I have to remind myself, what am I going to be for this meeting? Am I going to be the kid from Brooklyn? Or am I going to be the head of an elite, influential firm, a member of the establishment? And the bottom line is, it wasn't always my decision to make. I think anybody talking to me would think, he's both. But I've always been both. And so when I go back and talk, if I went back and met my old self, I don't think I'd find him that much different than my current self, frankly.
No. But you were not, you worry about something, or you were, I could imagine that. I don't know when you're
look, I worried about it. When I was growing up, I was made to worry in the household because my father had gotten laid off, eventually got a job in the post office. We worried about, money. We worried about all sorts of things. I think that was very, very good training for my eventual life. Running a big firm that took a lot of risk in the markets and that had a big balance sheet where nothing could go wrong anywhere in the world without it affecting you, and half the time they'd accuse you of causing it. And I would say that I always was a worrier. And at one point I said, you get into a room with a lot of tough guys who are trying to say, I know this. I said, look, I'm a worrier, not a warrior. So I'm always, and by the way, and that's suited because at the end of the day, all the good things and easy things and success, people know how to deal with good things. Some people could be worse at it than others, but it's easier to deal. Most of the time you had to deal with problems. And I think I was a very good, I dealt well with problems, and I think I was pretty good, and probably because of my childhood, I was pretty good at looking around corners and finding the cloud around every silver lining.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I was a good spotter of impending risk events. Nobody's perfect, believe me, and we weren't perfect at it, but I would say that my ear was very attuned to the indications of something going wrong.
Makes sense, yeah. And then what do you think young Lloyd would tell you today?
By the way, I'm not sure there ever was a young Lloyd, to be perfectly honest.
You were not young?
No, I was young chronologically, but I was,
It's amazing. You feel like you didn't change, and
no, I didn't. No, I was always. I mean, I was always. I lived in a household where there was nobody went to college, nobody had the experiences I wanted to have. I did a lot of stuff on my own initiative, stumbled away along, made mistakes, but I don't know. I wish I would have. My next childhood won't be my second one; it'll be my first one.
Okay. Okay, so we'll try. So we come back in 10 years, or
yeah. Well, let's move it up.
100. Okay. So, okay. Throughout your life, you talk about feeling like you don't fit in.
Well, I mean, I did climb the greasy pole of Goldman Sachs, so I did fit in. I don't want to overdo it, but like a lot of people, I think I found a lot. Look, when I wrote the book, I get emails every day, long emails from people I didn't meet, and also from some people I met 30 years ago sometimes, and saying, oh gosh, these are my experiences too. I also felt like an imposter. I always felt that they were going to discover that I don't know anything. Why should I be making this decision? There must be better people to do this. And it turns out that must be, I can't say that everyone is like that, but I think it's more general. I would say that in my time, I have met some people that looked to me like they were voted most likely to succeed every year from kindergarten on. But I'd say most people are strivers, made their way, took advantage of opportunities, not geniuses necessarily, but some combination of IQ and EQ and hard work and the commitment of some important mentor that paved the way. And of course you find and make the most of opportunities. But I would say that one of the things I wanted to accomplish is to make it clear that these things are accessible. That there are very few people that are geniuses. People throw that word around quite a lot. But most of the people I met who've been very, very successful, they could be at the margin smarter, at the margin less smart, but they have some combination of things that other people could have too. And again, there's opportunity that comes some people's way that doesn't come others, but generally, by and large, they made the most of it. Look, everyone, like people who play poker, the guys who win in poker are not the luckiest because over enough hands, everybody statistically is going to get the same kinds of cards. It's just who plays them better. But it's not because they're geniuses, it's because they're applying themselves well generally.
Yeah. And sometimes it's also because you don't know the codes. So some, back when you were at Harvard and to country club or to Wall Street, there are codes there. The people are, the way they dress, the way they talk, sometimes we don't know the code.
Yes, and there are ways of adjusting to it. So, for example, even now when I speak to you, I'm carrying myself and I'm making. You make the best of what you have, and so guess what? I would humbly brag about how I didn't know the code, yet here I am. Yeah. So that's okay. You are who you are, and you deal with it. But I decided a long time ago that I'm not going to be the guy who stepped out of GQ. I'm not going to be if they were casting the role of a big-time CEO, I wouldn't be Central Casting's first choice. But somehow there I go. I teetered my way through it for like a lot of years.
I think it's your superpower somewhere, don't you think?
Well, if that's I always thought, and I always thought I was more the best I could be. It was Batman, not Superman, because Superman had being the nepo baby that he was.
Okay.
He was born on Krypton. He had advantages that no one else had. You could never be him because you weren't going to be born on Krypton. You couldn't fly and you didn't have super strength.
Yeah.
But Batman.
You can.
He was just a normal guy that worked hard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, ready, everyone?
So I was always a Batman fan, not a Superman. Superman was not accessible. Batman was.
Batman was.
Yes.
I know someone home also who is a fan of Batman. So now let's talk 1 minute about your dad. And your dad worked at the post office. You were visiting the workplace for his retirement party. And at one point, you tell the story of seeing the new electronic mail sorting machine who is going to replace the job of your dad. And you said, so I quote, "I feel so sad when I think about the waste of my dad's brain and effort." Wow, that's a heavy reflection.
Well, it was a moment that I carried with me. And by the way, it speaks to the present when people are doing things that don't need to be done. So my dad finally, got a job in civil service, which, by the way, he thought was the greatest thing in the world because you couldn't get laid off in civil service. And he worked nights at the post office sorting mail for the 10% night differential that you got by working at night. And there was consequences to the family because we never saw him. He had a job in the day, and he worked nights at the post office sorting mail. And the only time I ever saw his workplace, because it was the post office, it wasn't private industry, people couldn't go in there, except the day he was retiring, we, his immediate family, could go in and see for the first time where he worked, when he said goodbye to his friends that he worked next to for, a couple of decades. And I noticed when I was there was this big machine wrapped in plastic behind him, and I said, "What's that?" And it turns out that was a mail sorting machine that had been there for years, that had it been turned on, would have done the job that he was doing many times faster and never make a mistake, but it wouldn't be turned on because it was the post office and they wouldn't fire anybody. And they were waiting for attrition to occur. They were waiting for my dad to decide to retire so they could turn on the machine that would make. And so I thought, oh my God, you're doing this, and that really is a job, and his pay really was compensation in the sense that you're being compensated for drudgery, I guess, and to look over your shoulder and realize you didn't even have to do what you were doing, and I thought, that has, I don't bring that up. I told the story because I was going through certain key moments, but I think about that time, even now, as technology evolves and people are doing things that are surely not going to need to be done. Look, in my life, I was, I'm sure there's lawyers in the room. As a junior lawyer, I spent my time shepherdizing cases. What does that mean? I was looking, every time a case was cited, you had to go to the library, pull up every case that ever cited that case to make sure it wasn't critically commented upon or overruled. And that was drudgery, hours in the library. Today you push a button, nobody does that. People do that as often as they use a slide rule. And so there's always that in life. And so one of the things I said, let's make sure that we're not spending our time doing things that don't need to be done.
That's a very good point. And I was thinking about, of course, today and AI and how people can feel, do they feel like that? And do you have any advice for them,
Yeah, I would say my advice at this point, I have a lot of advice. I don't know if anything is apt because, this is a future with which people are going to not be particularly good at predicting it. I think the best you can do is contingency plan for it, because a lot of things, we're going to see, eventually, AI is going to replace a lot of things we do today, and it's going to also, once we finish replacing the things we do and do it quicker and faster and better, we're going to do things with AI that you couldn't contemplate doing today. Just like every change in technology, you replace what used to be done, and then you discover new things. And new things will be created, and old things will become irrelevant and be displaced. And there'll be some dislocation. And there's no point to arguing about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, because it's going to happen. You're not going to unlearn it. You could talk about, as we read now and we go into war to prevent people from getting nuclear weapons and stuff, you could think to yourself, was it a good thing that we split the atom and created atomic power? Because there's certainly value in it, because we have electricity made by atomic plants, but we also have the anxiety of nuclear bombs and everything. You could spend your time talking about it, but guess what? We have it. We're not going to unlearn it. We're not going to unlearn AI, and we're going to keep going forward in it. So I think we need to adjust it. And by the way, if asked whether it's a good thing, I can't be against anything that makes people more leveraged, creates greater efficiency. It's up to, frankly, the political sector to figure out how to contingency plan for the dislocation that's going to happen, and which is inevitable and almost upon us.
Yeah, and also I think that AI, so the more we'll do with the machine, and the more we have to think about to keep the machine in service of the human being, and us to try to increase our humanity.
I think so. That's my opinion now. But if 40 years from now, there's a couple of machines up here in these chairs talking to other machines in the seats.
So maybe there is a machine to replace you and me. So what are we going to do?
You turn the clock back. There could have been two dinosaurs here chatting to a room full of dinosaurs. But things evolve.
Exactly. Maybe there would be time, to be kid again.
I know that I'm going to pass away 5 minutes before we're all going to be loaded up into laptops.
So we'll see. Okay.
No, we just don't. I think the future is. Again, I was in the risk business my career. That the future is unknowable. I try to predict the present. I think knowing what's going on at any given moment is hard enough, let alone the future.
To stay in the present.
I think the future is all about planning for what could happen in contingencies, and if you're a good contingency planner, you'll get off, when things happen, you'll get off the mark so quickly people will think you foresaw it. But really, you're just kind of planning, doing a very good job of planning for the contingencies that could happen. And AI is going to, is one of those important contingencies. It helps to have experts. It helps to be on the right track, not on the wrong track. But I will tell you, I'm as close to the middle as anybody could. And I know nothing, so I know they know nothing. The future is a very hard thing to figure out where things are going.
So stay in the present moment.
Well,
as much as possible.
Try to get it, but I'm just saying, look, it doesn't relieve you of the responsibility of trying to get it right. But I wouldn't be killing myself. I wouldn't be going, if I were running the company today, I wouldn't be committing myself to one path in one direction. I'd be going in a lot of directions at the same time. But by the way, which is what's happening in the world. Different people are pursuing different routes of the technology because you just don't know. Certainly, when it gets resolved, we'll look back and saying, gee, we wasted time here, we wasted money there, because you don't know. But you just have to, from where we are, things can go in a lot of different places, and you just have to plan for it.
Exactly. So, okay, very fast, because we are behind. 2008, very quickly. So this is, of course, the financial crisis and a big leadership moment for you. So one question only. It's looking back on that moment, what did you learn about human beings?
Okay. Well, let me say that
2 minutes.
Before I got there, I had, in my firm, we had the crisis, not my firm, in the financial markets in that period. We had the crisis of the century roughly every 4 or 5 years. So I can name them people. We had the dot-com bubble and the Asian currency crisis and long-term cap, and so you learn about, of course you learn things along the way. I think mostly going back to the way we started the conversation. You could decide that, you're an imposter, you're not, and you're not the right, but guess what? You're there, you have to step up, and you have to do this stuff. And if not you, then who? Might as well be you. And I learned also that the most important thing in a crisis, of which we had many, is to get the organization functioning well. It's just like just like on an airline when the stewardess or the steward gets on and says, remember, if the oxygen mask come out, put the mask on yourself first, then your kid, because you're not doing anybody any good if you go, if you suffocate.
Of course.
And so you learn about how to deal in a crisis. You learn how to communicate with your staff, get them to be focused. In our organization, where companies that looked to the outside world a lot like ours were going bankrupt and other things were happening, and of course the press was all over and terrible. Everyone is stopping and standing and staring at the TV set all day. And I said, get on and say, I need everybody in this company to do their jobs. Because the best thing, if you want to make a contribution to the long-term success of our firm, do your job better than you had ever done it before. Take care of your clients. I need 2% of the firm to focus on ourselves. And in return, I'll communicate with you all the time, and I'll tell you what's going on. I'll express my anxieties, what I'm optimistic, pessimistic. You'll know more than you need to know. And that's what we did. And so one of the issues for the firm, and spent a lot of time in the book talking about it, we got through that crisis better than just about everybody. And of course, one of the rewards for getting through it better than just about everybody was to get pummeled for having gotten through it. It went from how did you do it in an admiring way, to how did you do it? Because at the end of the day, there needed to be some reaction to the financial class, of which I was one. And it was very difficult it was pointless to go after the companies that went under or the companies that lost tens of billions of dollars. We were one of the few standing, and also we had at what some people thought the benefit, but turned out to be a disadvantage of my predecessor was Secretary of Treasury, half the economists and financiers in the administration dealing with everything were ex-Goldman, which, by the way, happens a lot in Democratic and Republican administrations in the United States and other countries. It's one of the things about Goldman. So we had to deal with those situations. And, you know, it was, again, the financial crisis had its existential part. Are we going to get through this? And then it had its reputational part, which took a very long part of my tenure to manage through.
Thank you for that. Okay, so now 2015. 2015. So
okay.
You learn you have a blood cancer, and suddenly your life changed, I suppose. So in a minute, you have to leave, you know, the airport and everything, and to stay at the hospital. I know that those moments are very important in our life. And I just have a question, because you told me you had a lot of time to think, of course. And did you think about how you want to be remembered? And what was very important for you?
You know, I never thought about how I want to be remembered. I always thought, you know, again, being in the risk business, I always, you know, and being kind of fatalistic always, you know, get my exam. And every time I every time I got the reports of tests that I took, and I felt mostly okay all the time, except never sleeping, always traveling. And finally, I got a call from the doctor, and he gave me a report, and he said, "Oh God, brace yourself," and blah blah blah, bad news. And I had to say, I didn't welcome it, but it was always a surprise to me when you said there was nothing wrong with me. And here it was, and he said, "Oh, you have, you know, something. You have a lot of tumors, blah blah blah. It's a blood cancer of some kind. We have to type in and go through it." And I don't know. It wasn't like I was, you know, it wasn't like I was hit in the face with a shovel or anything. I mean, let me tell you, it was pretty unwelcome. I don't want to suggest anything other than that, but I dealt with it, and it occurred to me. And by the way, you do think that, you know, I had one of those that when I had the initial indication, it had a 50-50 outcome, which got better over time, because, you know, once you can decide, once you have some experience taking the chemo, I had 600 hours of chemo in connection with it, but once you can take it and you can take the chemo and you're not going to, you know, you're not getting sick from the chemo, then already your odds of recovery are going back. So incrementally, the odds kept improving, but I would lie, you know, at night, you know, I would roll dice in my head. Believe me, you know, in my line of work, you compute odds and probabilities all the time, and largely in your head. And I was doing that with myself, but wasn't like I felt like I was an immortal and suddenly I became mortal. I was always thinking about that kind of stuff. I thought about some things differently. I thought about how I wanted to, in some ways, deal with my family, deal with, you know, things I cared about. You know, should you give things with your cold hand or your warm hand? If I get through this, I'll do this differently. I was, you know, visited in the, you know, I had 6 3-week cycles, and in the hospital 4 nights, and people would visit me, and I'd say goodbye to them, you know, while I was spending 4 days in the hospital. But, you know, I had my job, which I continued to do, which was a blessing, because it was what I thought about. And, you know, it was like a lot of things I did. It was not, I had no choice, no problem.
Yeah, this is your mantra, right?
Yeah,
One of your mantra.
You know, again, if my wife comes and says, you know, we want to paint the wall, and she shows me 2 identical colors of blue, and she says, which one do you like? And they both are identical to me. That's hard. Taking chemo for cancer,
you don't have choice.
Is not hard. It's unpleasant, but it's not hard.
Yeah.
So no choice, no problem.
No choice, no problem. Okay, so I take that.
Yeah, and by the way, going back to the crisis, a lot of that also was no choice, no problem.
No choice, no problem. Yeah, absolutely. So I like this one. I'm going to keep it. So we don't have time anymore, so I go to the last one. So what makes you feel hopeful about the future?
God, well, the thing that should make everybody feel hopeful is that every generation has gone through its share of problems and distress, and guess what? We continue to motor on. Things work. I always told people in a crisis, You know, this will work out. It won't be the end of the world. And you know something? When it does work out, everybody's going to think back and think to themselves, who behaved well and who behaved poorly? And you're going to be, even junior people in the organization, you know, when roll the clock forward 30 years and you're all going to, even that dopey guy sitting next to you, you're going to be part of the cohort that's running the world 20 or 30 years from now, and your reputation with each other is going to come from how well you're thought of having responded at this moment. So act well, because you never know how important your reputation is with whomever it is who's observing you. And I would say things tend to work out. If I was woken up out of a deep sleep, and I didn't know how long I was asleep for, and somebody said, what do you want to be, long or short? The country, the world? Go long, because most of the time things are on an uptick. And by the way, that doesn't mean we're not going through we're not going to go through anxious times. It doesn't mean we're not going through bad times. But generally, things work out. And, you know, you make your contribution to how that works out, and that's how you'll be thought of. So what should you be optimistic about? I can rattle off things that everybody's worried about in the world today, which I don't even have to talk about, the Gulf and, all this stuff.
We don't have time.
And here we are, with all that misery and all that distress. The economy is in generally good shape. Now, I know there's a K-ness to it, and some parts of it are doing poorly, but on a macro basis, the whole of the economy is doing well, even though the distribution of the wealth that's created is not uneven and is creating polarization. That we're not, let me tell you, I point out we've gone through tougher times than this, and I joke, we did have a civil war, but you don't have to go that far back. I was a sentient human being in the late 60s when the National Guard was, shot kids on campus. Kids were fleeing to Canada to avoid the draft. Tanks were literally rolling through Czechoslovakia. That was the foreign affairs that were going on today versus Ukraine. There was literally, we were at DEFCON 2 during the Cuban Missile Crisis, stopping Russian ships on the high seas, not just a blockade of Iran. I would say we navigated through those times. This is not worse than that. And we got through that. If our parents got through that, we'll get through this.
We can make it. Yeah.
Of course we can. Not only can we will. And
so
when we get through it, think of how you want to be thought of yourself. Do you want to be thought of yourself as someone who is wringing your hands and complaining? Or do you want to be thought of as someone who is making a contribution to get us to a better place?
Yeah, choose how you want to show up, right?
That's the legacy that people should be thinking about.
Yeah, sure.
How you want to be thought of in that way.
How will you want to show up? So a little last question, but really last one. So I know you like stories. So finish the sentence for me, please.
Oh, I finish everybody's sentence all the time.
Okay, I know. So it's hard. But
it won't be hard for me to finish your sentence.
Almost there. So Lloyd Blankfein, the story of a man who
had made the most of the luck he had.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, we made it.
You can't make yourself...
39 minutes.
You can't make yourself smarter, but you can be on time.
Exactly. So, okay, thank you. So, we are going to turn to the audience now. And to start, I want to introduce you to two special guests with us tonight. So I know Tony already introduced them. So
it's not my kindergarten teacher, is it?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is your young one.
Yes.
Young Lloyd.
Oh, my younger self. Go on.
Yes, yes, exactly. So say hi, please. So Halima and Ashlyn. So are two high school seniors here in New York, and they have two questions for you. They read your book, and they are also part of the New York Public Library Teen Ambassador Program, as Tony mentioned it, and they are ready, to come here and ask the questions. So I think Halima, would you like to go first? Oh, here she is.
Hi, good evening. As a senior in high school, heading off to college in a few months, I'm wondering, what should young people focus on when pursuing a career? There's pressure to have the most impressive title quickly, but what might that approach be missing?
Well, if I would advise, which I do from time to time, advise people what to study, I would say, look, there's a portion of the world which you don't seem to be in that's going to really benefit from learning a trade. People understand that and focus on it, for whom the investment that one makes in college, may not be the best thing for them to do. But clearly you are in the category of people who's going off and getting an education. We don't know how the world is evolving. We talked about AI, and you don't know how you're evolving. So my advice is not to focus too early. I would say there are people out there that think everybody should drop out of college, pursue your career, which is kind of ironic since your life expectancy is to 100. Since you're going to live longer, I don't think you should be in a super rush to start your career and make yourself narrow. I would say, again, given the uncertainties of the world and the uncertainties of what you yourself will grow into, get a liberal arts education. That's what your college is for. You have plenty of time to learn the narrow technicalities of your career when you start your job.
Thank you so much.
That's a very wise one. So, Ashleen, what is your question?
Good evening, everyone. Reflecting upon your career, how has your definition of success changed from early in your career to now, after leading one of the world's most influential financial institutions?
At different ages, success for me was every time I got to a place, when I got to college and I got to my Harvard, I said, oh my God, let me get through this place. And then when I got to Goldman, let me survive for 2 years in this place. And then when I became a partner, I said, oh my God, can I make it? Can I be a partner for 2 years before they discover the mistake they made? And so I spent, my definition of success was, I was lucky in a way, because it wasn't some long-term goal I was ever striving to. I was trying to get to the next place unburdened by some higher expectation of what I should do in the longer term. That was a blessing. And so I just wanted to get to the next place. I wasn't burdened. I will tell you, so at different stages was different things. Now, my definition of success, or the validation that I get, is the fact that I discovered, and by the way, the book has revealed it, because I'm getting a lot of incoming from a lot of people who've read it, who I never knew, and some people who I knew 30 years ago who I made impression. The fact that I helped, was a mentor to, in some cases was a tormentor to, other people who somehow think at this stage, and I didn't realize it at the time, that I helped them, that I inspired them, that I taught them, that I took an interest in them. I didn't always know I was taking an interest in them. I was trying to get stuff out of them, maybe for my own benefit. But what stacks up today as a success for me is the friendships and the appreciation that I managed to accumulate. And that's success for me.
Thank you.
Halima and Shim, thank you very much for your question, and thank you for everything you do for the ambassador also. So now, in your last few minutes, so I have some question here. So we have 20 minutes. Let's pick one.
Give me those cards.
No. I choose. I like to choose. So. Okay, where do we start? So let's start here. If I had $500 million to invest.
Go on.
Let's imagine, right? So I'm not talking about you.
Where's the rest of it?
Okay. So what would you suggest behind that?
Well, it depends on your wiring. I would say the sensible thing to do would just be go off and have a good time. but we're not. But unfortunately, I'm not wired to go off and have a good time. So I would have to find something to be stressed about. Where should you? If you're asking me an investment question, I would say with $500 million, you're pretty insulated from the ups and downs of the short-term markets. And so I would probably be plowing myself into, the new economy and technology and stuff like that. If the $500 million, if the question is meant to be, if you were liberated from the need to support yourself by $500 million, I would say I'd go into the library and satisfy all the things about which I've been curious over the years, and have the luxury of learning. One of the things, and I know this is, your husband and I had this, because I know Hubert teaches at school now after his successful career as a CEO, and his teaching, I tried that for 5 minutes, and I said to myself, gee, why am I teaching? What I really want to do is learn. And so that's how I spend a lot of my time.
I hope you're satisfied. So you know what you do now. So another one.
I would focus on getting the $500 million as a priority.
Yeah. And have some good time too,
yes. And for those of you who are richer than that, I'm sorry that you lost the balance.
You don't want to go to the moon?
I don't want to go to New Jersey.
Okay. You stay here?
Yes.
Okay, good to know. You know where to find him. So.
Yes.
Okay, so another one. Did you have a special teacher who influenced you?
I remember some teachers, yes, along the way, and not profound, but I also had people who took an interest in me, the most important of which were people who to my mind, had no benefit in taking an interest in me, and that made it all the more sincere, and it established my appreciation. I remember when I got to my law firm, and I still was, a kid from Brooklyn. I went straight through. I never took any time off. I went through my first job in law school, and I had never, when you go to college and law school, and law school itself, you don't, you didn't wear clothes, you don't wear suits, you don't have. I remember going in and somebody taking me aside and say, instead of those 5 polyester ties you're wearing, why don't you buy one nice one? And why don't you wear white shirts instead of those, noisy colors that don't go with the stupid tie you wear? And, people, it's funny that the things that people taught me, wasn't that I remember that did the most for me was, or I should put it this way, the things I were most grateful for was the thing that they don't have courses for, was just the fact that people took an interest and took the personal risk and risked offending me by telling me something that if my father had gone to work in a suit in a profession, he might have taught me, but he didn't, and I didn't know, and so somebody watched me and took me aside and tried to straighten me out. And so those are important lessons also, but other than that, I don't know. One of my regrets was that I went to these great schools where professors had office hours and invited students to come in, and I was so focused on just getting through it that I really didn't, I really wasted a lot of that time. I didn't form very close relationships, and that's a big, and my advice to someone else would be to do that.
To do that.
And I didn't take advantage, but the lessons, most of the investment that people made in me and the lessons I had were, once I'd crossed over and became a professional. Mm. And I was lucky in that way, because not everybody takes interest in other people.
Mm. Nice. No, I wanted to make a joke. So what are the most important qualities of a CEO?
I would say the qualities that I would look for in anything, moving up ahead, be a CEO, going ahead, is I like people who are curious, who want to know. If somebody comes in and tells me that they're Googling something 40 times a day, I like that person. I mean, life is an open book test now. So anytime you don't know, personally, I walk along, somebody gives me an address, the street is called Blippity Blip Avenue, and I want to know who is Blippity Blip and why'd they name a street for him. And I look, and I just like, if you're curious about, the world's always changing. Your careers are evolving. The skills that you need to know to be a CEO or to be any advanced thing aren't related to the specifics of your industry or what you have to do that year or what is compelled. It's curiosity and the ability to learn things, the ability to recruit people to your banner, to get them to want to work with you, to make those implied contracts that aren't in writing, but where the person that's working for you knows you'll be good for them, and so they're going to work hard to be good for you. Again, curiosity, good people skills. You have to be smart enough, but most of the rooms I walk into, everybody's smart enough. The harder the EQ sometimes is harder to get to than IQ. And again, I come back again. So-and-so, the biggest compliment, the person's a curious. Now, you don't want to be asked dopey questions, and a dopey question is the same question you've asked 6 times. But I would rather have somebody who wants to know, look, I don't know, I don't know, people make the observation, somebody is running, one day is running an auto company, and next he gets hired in a job to run an aeronautics company, or is running a service company, and then he runs a Met. How could people do that? Because the answer is the skill set you need isn't the narrowness of the product or the service. The skill set that you need is how quickly could you learn stuff, how good are you to strategize to get from where you are to a better place or to get from the present to the future, and how well can you mobilize the people who do know the real stuff to want to support you and who want to make you succeed because they see in it their own interests will be benefited by your success. And those are the things, and if you have those down, then you can go and be the CEO of anything.
Yeah, and maybe be a coach also,
Well, the coach, as you must realize, is the highest, most exalted thing you can be.
No, of course.
Yes, of course.
No, of course not.
Not that I pander to my audience, but go on.
So, talking about curiosity, what types of books do you read? Examples.
Oh, I read a lot of history books. I like history. And I think history is a good field for people to go into. I said liberal arts, but one of the things I think people should always do if you want it, and it's good for, liberal arts is good to be a well-rounded person, good for your own sake. But most people in the world want to deal with other people who are interesting. It's good for your commercial life to be a well-rounded person. And if you're going to be and I think knowing history is a good thing, and as attributed to Mark Twain, but he probably never said it, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. Knowing history and knowing cycles and knowing that people have gone through, it's like what I said, 1968 was worse than 2026 by most metrics in terms of anxiety and the risk in the world. Knowing that and things like that we've gone through cycles before prevents you from being too elated and extrapolating from the best of moments, and it keeps you from being too miserable and depressed at the worst of times, because on both things there are cycles to things. And I think knowing that there are cycles, and by the way, there are cycles in business, and there are cycles in history. People tell me, oh my God, the politics is so bitter and bad. This is the end of the American experiment, blah, blah. I said, we've been through these before. We went through McCarthy, or we went through our fear and anxiety over communism. Now maybe our fear and anxiety is over militant Islam. But we've gone through cycles like these before, and if we've gotten through them before, we'll get through them again. And I always was more serene than other people based on the fact that I understood that we've gone through worse times than these, so guess what? We have the capacity to get through these. So I read a lot of history. And I'll tell you what else I listen to a lot of. I discovered great courses on tape, and I'm filling in holes of my liberal education that I missed. And I'm listening to a lot of, I went through a period where some reason I liked anthropology and linguistics. And now I'm listening to a lot of courses on physics of big things and physics of small things, like relativity and cosmology. And also I'm listening to a lot of lectures on quantum mechanics. And the thing I like best about that is knowing that no one in the world understands it. So I'm relieved. I'm relieved of the obligation of having to understand what I'm listening to. So it makes it more enjoyable as opposed to thinking that it's possible to understand it and punishing myself for not understanding it.
I like that too. One in particular you would recommend to listen or to read?
There's go on the great courses, and it's on Audible. I'm not a commercial. I don't have stock in the company. But if you go in, there's 1,000 things, and there's some great, at every level, there's like 1,200 courses on the thing, ranging from, physics for idiots and poets and physics for, advanced graduate degrees. And you can work your way up in any topic. And what a luxury it is to have the time and not have to scrape and make a living. And I can do this stuff. What a wonderful thing.
I think it's amazing.
That goes back to, I'm still focused on that $500 million question.
Yeah, exactly. But whatever comes first, and you
first thing you do is open up a private account at Goldman Sachs.
Okay. So now we know.
Old habits die slowly. Sorry.
Okay. So, considering the business and political climate.
Climate, it's
Climate,
okay.
thank you.
I understand broken French.
I know you understand French, so you saved me. So in New York City, if you were a young finance professional, would you stay in New York City or move to Miami?
Well, I think to this, look, you can get lucky and you can find anything. The probabilities are more in your favor if you start your career at Goldman Sachs. But move to Miami before your kids start school and your wife makes friends and makes it impossible for you to move to a more favorable tax location. So here I am.
Yes, stuck in New York.
Retired and still a New York taxpayer.
Poor
and
you.
And let me tell you, I'm still waiting for my thank you.
Okay, so you know what to do, family.
Yes.
Okay, what else do we have? How much did luck factor into your career?
Look, everybody's the beneficiary of luck, but if you live long enough and have enough impressions, again, it's like that person who plays poker, and yet the best poker player wins every tournament. Now, how can that be? Isn't it luck involved? If you get enough hands, statistically, everybody gets the same set of opportunities. People play them better than others. Now, some people, I don't know that all the opportunity set that comes in your life is enough of a population so that you could say that I think there are some people who get disproportionately good luck or disproportionately bad luck, but I don't think people should be wringing their hands, worrying about whether they're lucky or unlucky. I think you should wring your hands and focus on playing the cards you get as well as you can play them.
Yeah. And knowing how to take
And
the
also,
luck,
people don't understand. There are benefits and burdens to every situation. When I was growing up, I thought, gee, how lucky would I have been if I'd been born into a more prosperous family, or this, or I had benefits of that, or I didn't have to work on this job, or didn't have to, work in the food, in the dorm crew or this, and instead I had a convertible in college or something like. And then I realized I know people like that, and then those same people that I thought were so lucky, turns out that they were victims of high expectations that they couldn't meet, or they were oppressed by it. I'm telling you, in every situation, there are benefits and burdens. I think just play the cards you have, and don't worry about whether you got your share of good luck or bad luck.
Yeah, and I think luck is always coming, but you have to see it.
And by the way, the point I'm making is you don't know what good fortune is or not. Plus, I will tell you, one of the lucky things it turns out for me is I needed to make money when I was getting out of school. If I had gotten a job for $100, when I graduated from college, if it paid $50 more an hour or $50 more a week, I took that job. I did not have to source my motivation. I know kids who are well-to-do before they start their first job, and they spend all day wondering what they should do, and by the time they figure out what to do that day, it's time for dinner.
Okay, so it's time to dinner soon here too. So, your story is inspiring and worth telling. What do you want your kids to take away from the book? Is there anything you couldn't say in person to your kids?
I would like to be a benefit to my kids and not a burden. I worry sometimes that the arc of my career, which affords benefits to my kids because, you know, they went, you know, they didn't have to work and they didn't have to do dorm crew or working that job. That's an obvious benefit, but also I've created the burden of higher expectations on their part. Mm-hmm. And there's benefits to them because there's no mythology. They've met smart people and people who run companies and high people in government just by tracking with me. And so the mythology that otherwise is intimidating to people and the mysterious nature of the world is not mysterious to them. Mm-hmm. That's a benefit. Mm-hmm. But people thinking that maybe they had advantages and that maybe they shouldn't get credit for the good things they've accomplished is a burden on them. So with respect to my kids, I hope that the benefits outweigh the burden, just like every parent would.
Yeah. That's so good. I think that's a good way to stop. So it's right 8 p.m. So
Hortense,
thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Lloyd Blankfein. Thank you.